The mystery of D.B. Cooper, the man who vanished with a fortune. On the evening of November 24, 1971, while most Americans were preparing for Thanksgiving, a quiet drama began to unfold that would become one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in U.S. history. A man who called himself Dan Cooper walked into Portland International Airport, wearing a dark suit, a neatly pressed white shirt, a black tie, and polished shoes. He carried nothing but a briefcase and a calm confidence that made him seem like any other businessman heading home for the holidays. He purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle, Washington for $20 in cash. The flight, Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, was a short, 30-minute trip on a Boeing 727. No one paid him much attention. He was polite, well-spoken, and unremarkable in every way. But what happened next would make him a legend, the flight that changed history. Flight 305 departed Portland at 2:50 p.m., carrying 36 passengers and 6 crew members. Once in the air, the quiet man seated in row 18 lit a cigarette and ordered a bourbon and soda. The stewardess, Florence Schaffner, noted his calm demeanor. Then, just after takeoff, Cooper handed her a small note. She assumed it was his phone number, as passengers often flirted with flight attendants back then. She slipped it into her pocket without reading it. But Cooper leaned closer and said in a low, serious voice, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Florence froze. She opened the note. It was neatly printed in all capital letters. "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit beside me." The demands. When Florence sat down, Cooper opened his briefcase slightly. Inside were 8 red cylinders wired to a large battery. It looked terrifyingly real. Cooper's voice stayed calm, almost polite. He gave her his demands. He wanted $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck ready in Seattle to refuel the plane for a getaway. She walked to the cockpit with the note, her hands shaking. The pilot, Captain William Scott, radioed Seattle Air Traffic Control, who in turn contacted the FBI and Northwest Orient headquarters. Incredibly, the airline agreed to pay the ransom. They didn't want to risk lives. For the next 2 hours, Flight 305 circled Puget Sound, waiting for Seattle authorities to gather the cash and parachutes. Meanwhile, passengers had no idea what was happening. Cooper told the flight attendants to act normal. He paid for his drink, chatted casually, and even seemed concerned about the crew's comfort. When Florence asked if he had a grudge against the airline, Cooper smiled faintly and said, "I don't have a grudge, miss, I just have a job to do." The ransom delivery. At 5:24 p.m., the plane landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport under bright runway lights. Cooper instructed the pilot to park away from the main terminal and have the cabin lights dimmed. He demanded that only one person approach with the money and parachutes. An airline employee, dressed in a uniform, walked toward the plane carrying a large canvas bag filled with $20 bills, all marked and recorded by the FBI. Cooper checked the bag briefly, then ordered that all 36 passengers be released. They hurried off the plane, unaware they had just been part of a hijacking that would make history, the escape plan. Now, only 5 people remained on board. Cooper, the pilot, the co-pilot, the flight engineer, and one stewardess, Tina Mucklow. Cooper ordered the crew to take off again, heading toward Mexico City. He gave detailed instructions. Fly under 10,000 feet, keep the speed below 200 knots, and leave the rear staircase lowered. These were unusual demands. Only someone familiar with aviation would know that the Boeing 727's rear stairs could be lowered in flight. Cooper seemed to know exactly what he was doing. As rain and wind battered the plane, Cooper donned a parachute, tied the ransom money in a bundle, and tightened his tie clip one last time. Around 8:13 p.m., somewhere over the rugged forests of southwestern Washington, he lowered the stairs and vanished into the stormy night. Vanished without a trace. When the plane landed safely in Reno, Nevada, Cooper was gone. The staircase was damaged, the money was missing, and the storm outside made any immediate search impossible. FBI agents, state police, and soldiers scoured the forests near Ariel, Washington, but found nothing. No parachute, no body, no briefcase. It was as if D.B. Cooper had dissolved into the rain. For months, the FBI searched every lead. They interviewed suspects across the country. One name came up often, Dwayne Weber, a quiet man who, On his deathbed, allegedly told his wife, "I'm Dan Cooper." Others pointed to Richard McCoy, a Vietnam veteran who hijacked another Boeing 727 months later using a nearly identical method. McCoy, however, was caught and later killed in a shootout. Still, none of the evidence ever proved that McCoy or Weber was Cooper. Theories and legends. Over the decades, theories multiplied like wildfire. Some believed Cooper didn't survive the jump. His parachute could have failed in the violent winds and freezing rain. Others insisted he landed safely and blended back into society, living quietly with his fortune. The name D.B. Cooper was itself an FBI mix-up. The hijacker called himself Dan Cooper, but a miscommunication with the press turned D.B. into the name everyone remembered. Some theorists speculated he was an ex-military paratrooper, given his knowledge of the aircraft and flight tactics. Others said he was a disgruntled airline employee or even a government operative, but then something incredible happened. The money discovery. In 1980, nearly 9 years after the hijacking, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging along the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington, when he unearthed 3 weathered bundles of $20 bills. The serial numbers matched the D.B. Cooper ransom money. The discovery reignited the mystery. The bills were buried along the riverbank, miles from Cooper's suspected jump zone. How had they ended up there? Had Cooper buried them himself? Did the river carry them downstream? The FBI analyzed the bills, the soil, even the decay patterns, but could draw no clear conclusion. Cooper's trail had gone cold again. The FBI investigation. For 45 years, the FBI investigated thousands of suspects, checked fingerprints, and ran DNA tests from Cooper's tie, which he had left on the plane. Nothing matched. In 2016, the Bureau officially closed the case, calling it one of the longest and most exhaustive investigations in U.S. history. Yet the legend lived on. Books, movies, songs, and documentaries have kept D.B. Cooper's name alive for generations. He became a symbol of the ultimate American outlaw, calm, clever, and mysterious. Unlike typical criminals, he hurt no one, made no political demands, and executed a plan so daring that even law enforcement had to respect its brilliance. The man behind the myth. Who was D.B. Cooper? Maybe he was an ex-paratrooper, skilled enough to survive that jump. Maybe he died in the forest, his body never found. Or maybe, just maybe, he lived, laughed at the headlines, and lived out his days quietly, knowing the world would never forget his name. Every Thanksgiving, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, people still gather for CooperCon, celebrating the mystery that refuses to die. For half a century, D.B. Cooper has remained the only person in U.S. aviation history to commit air piracy and never be caught. The legacy of the Sky Pirate. D.B. Cooper became more than a criminal. He became a legend. In a time of Vietnam War tension, political unrest, and social change, Cooper's story offered Americans something rare, a mystery without bloodshed, a crime that felt almost noble in its precision. His case inspired FBI training procedures, air safety protocols, and even pop culture icons. He was the embodiment of the man who beat the system. Today, nearly 5 decades later, the mystery of D.B. Cooper endures. From time to time, new theories appear. Old suspects revisited, fresh evidence claimed. But the truth remains out of reach. Maybe that's the magic of it all. Because sometimes the greatest mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to remind us how small our certainties really are. The man in the black suit, stepping into the stormy night with a fortune in cash, is still out there, somewhere in America's collective imagination. And every time a plane cuts through the cold November sky, someone, somewhere still whispers his name, D.B. Cooper. If you love true historical mysteries that challenge logic and leave your mind racing, subscribe now to uncover more secrets buried in time. Because some stories, like D.B. Cooper's, never fade, they only grow deeper with every retelling.